Welcome to the closing panel of the Changing of the Gods premiere. I'm here with Kenny Ausubel, one of the directors of Changing of the Gods, and with Richard Tarnas, whose research Changing of the Gods is based upon. We are also hoping that Louisa Tiche will be joining us as well. And I do want to mention that Louis Schwartzberg was unable to join us this evening. My name is Becca Tarnas. And I'm delighted to be hosting and moderating the panel this evening. So just to give some introductions, first I want to introduce Kenny. Hi, Kenny.
Hey, Becca, great to see you.
Good to see you. Kenny is a producer, co-director, and writer of Changing of the Gods, as well as the co-founder of the Bioneers Conference with his wife, Nina Simons. And Kenny is an award-winning social entrepreneur, filmmaker, journalist, author, and media maker who has been at the forefront of progressive social change movements. And he brought in many of the leading members of the Bioneers network to be interview subjects for Changing of the Gods. Now, I also want to introduce Richard Tarnas. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Becca.
Richard Tarnas is a professor of psychology and cultural history at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, where he founded the graduate program in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. And he teaches courses in the history of ideas, archetypal studies, depth psychology, and religious evolution. And Rick is the author of The Passion of the Western Mind, which is a history of the Western worldview from the ancient Greek to the postmodern, and it's widely used in universities. And his second book, Cosmos and Psyche, Intimations of a New Worldview, is the basis for the series Changing of the Gods. I will wait to introduce Louisa Tiche until she is here with us. And to get us started, we have so many amazing questions that have been rolling in. But I wanted to start off, Kenny, first by asking you a question. As we know, astrology is a contentious subject in academia and among the intelligentsia. And 9 years ago, you embarked on this project of Changing of the Gods, and likely knowing that this might be a risk to your reputation in some circles. And so I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to take that risk, to speak up on behalf of astrology on a larger scale?
Yeah, it's a really great question, actually, a very human one for me. By the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I do need to tell people that you are father and daughter, Becca and Rick.
Yes.
And a beautiful model of what that can be. So thank you both.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, I seem to have an affinity for taking on difficult subjects that are pretty arcane, often controversial, and even dangerous, and trying to make them comprehensible and reasonable and bring them into the mainstream. And the first feature documentary that I did was in the 80s, called Hoxie, How Healing Becomes a Crime, which focuses on the case history of Harry Hoxie and his botanical reputed cure for cancer. And it's a very long, involved story, but it's a botanical formula and it turned out to have merit. But if you can imagine trying to make a film about unconventional cancer therapies in the 1980s and be taken seriously whatsoever, much less bring credibility. So that was, I have a history of this. But I went on to start a company called Seeds of Change that I co-founded, which was to bring seed diversity into the mainstream through backyard gardeners at a time when there was very little awareness of that and a very powerful, agro-industrial complex and all that. And then I wanted to start Bioneers, which is really about paradigm shifts and very different worldviews and ways of approaching how we live on Earth here in a way that lasts. And so we've been at it for subjects that people saw in the documentary in the series of biomimicry, for example. That was not even a UFO in 1990, and people kind of scoffed at the whole idea. Or something like traditional indigenous knowledge, which also was really not something people were looking at. Anyway, so long story short, I'd been wanting to make another film for a long time, and was zeroing in, kind of circling around, trying to figure out what to do. And I watched a lot of films, and one of the things that really struck me and bothered me, whether they were documentary or dramatic, was that they were still basically good guys and bad guys films, whoever was wearing the black or white hats at a given moment. And to me, that's just not reality. Life is so much more complex than that. And so there was something, I was thinking about a film about intelligence in nature, but there felt like there was something more. And so I just never, acted. Then in August of 2012, I finally got a brief vacation, and I had Cosmos and Psyche on my table for a few months, but it's a very long, intense book, and I needed to focus. Anyway, I didn't even get up for 4 or 5 days, I think, and I was reading passages to my wife out loud, and et cetera. And I just had this 3D holographic vision of what the film could be, which is pretty much what you've seen, using the Uranus-Pluto transit as the kind of window into the story, both of cosmology, consciousness, and also social movements. And as you indicated, I realized, oh my God, astrology, I mean, that's just not something for polite company. It's the epitome of kind of magical thinking and new age flakiness. And, I've spent years trying to build credibility for this pretty out there work. And do I really want to jeopardize that? And I hung out with it. And I think 2 things happened for me. One is I had to do this. I mean, it's just one of those things you've probably had it happen in your life. I have no idea how I'm ever going to pull this off, but I have to do this. So that was there. And then I thought about it carefully and realized, to be blunt, I mean, here we are at the end of the world on one level, certainly the end of the world as we know it. And what the film is very much about is that shift in worldviews, that shift in paradigms, that shift in our consciousness of who we are as people and our place in the cosmos. So if not now, when? And I just felt like I just need to kind of, button up and hope for the best. But I just felt like it really had to be done. And, my reputation is much less important than if we can make a difference.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate where you're emphasizing that feeling of just having to do it. In some ways that there is a choice always, but that deeply compelling feeling. Thank you.
Can I just add one brief thing to that, Becca? The other thing, as I mentioned, was this idea of black hats and white hats. And one of the brilliance of the archetypes and the way Rick has so wonderfully communicated that is the multivalence, that it's light and shadow and everything in between. And every moment, every day, we have according to our awareness, we have agency. We have a choice how we express those energies. But the truth is, we're capable, any one of us, of being an angel or a demon at any given moment. That's all real. And that's a really different story, than what we're living with today.
Absolutely. Yes, it reminds me of something that Carl Jung says, that know that the line of good and evil runs through your own heart.
Mm.
Well, Rick, I want to ask you a similar question. But I want to go further back in time to when you were at Esalen Institute in the 1970s and you were first introduced to astrology. And what indicated to you that this would become your life work, devoting decades to the research and even spending first 10 years writing an introductory history of philosophy to really set the stage before writing the book on astrology itself, Cosmos and Psyche? Why do you feel you were called to build the bridge between the academy and astrology?
A lot packed into that question, or at least packed into my any response I would give. It's a great question. I think that sense of calling that Kenny brought up in terms of that sense of having to do it. There's a calling. I think each of us has that. Every person that's born, in a sense, has a calling to flower in a certain way, in the same way that that the oak tree in our backyard has the calling to flower as an oak tree, and the butterfly as a butterfly. So that's. But in terms of, I didn't know exactly back then that this would become so central a part of my life work. I sometimes think the universe gives us information about our lives and about the future on a need-to-know basis. So you just make progress as you kind of just find out what you need to know in order to make the next best decision. And so there, when I was first exposed to astrology, I was first introduced to it actually while I was still back at Harvard, and I was a little, I was too intellectually armored, I think, to really take it seriously, even though it was coming from a professor and a Jungian analyst who'd been trained by Jung in Switzerland. But I didn't take it seriously until I was at Esalen working with Stan Grof and many other people, but particularly with Stan. And we were, when we, see, Esalen was a place where there were so many interesting new perspectives as well as ancient ones that were taught, that were practiced, that were taken seriously, and not just looked at as a museum piece or something to laugh at. So when we discovered that this perspective, which both of us had been quite skeptical of, that it actually allowed us to understand the dynamics of the human soul in a way that gave us new insight into, what kinds of energies, what kind of predispositions people would have, but also the timing of their life experience and how they might respond. Why do certain very powerful transformational experiences happen to a person at one time in their life rather than another? And to see the correlations, once we learned how to calculate birth charts, calculate the transits to the birth chart, the ongoing movements of the planets, it was just a revelation. And so I wanted to share that. And in terms of why I might have felt the calling to be a bridge with the academic world and this more esoteric perspective is simply that, I'd been academically trained all my life. It was just, that was who I was. And then this new information and new perspectives, or as I said, like ancient and esoteric and marginalized perspectives, the value of that came in. And I think all of us have the desire to kind of integrate the diverse parts of one's life and not have them be compartmentalized. And in my case, that meant, bringing together, say, the Harvard education part and the Esalen experience part, which were both deeply me. They just shaped me in so fundamental a way. So it came pretty naturally to build a bridge. And then the final thing to say is that, for the last 30 years, I've been teaching at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, this fantastic graduate school that, it's both this accredited graduate institution, and at the same time, it permits a generosity of metaphysical range of metaphysical perspectives and a support for entering into other cultural paradigms and other ways of looking at the universe in a way that was a very friendly setting, one in which I never felt, kind of out of place or anything like that. So I've kind of been in a fortunate position for 50 years of basically being in communities of learning that were extremely supportive of just this kind of research. So I haven't felt it as much as intense challenge or risk as I might have otherwise. And I see that we have Yaya Tish has now joined us, and it would be great to bring her in.
Alafia.
Lafia.
Sorry to be late, but I go from one Zoom to the next, and I got caught in the crosshairs of. I've become a Zombie these days. I have become a Zombie, but I'm glad that I finally got the link, and I am here, and happy to see you all. What are we talking about now?
Well, allow me to introduce you first officially into
Okay.
the space, and then I have a question for you. So, Yeye Louis Satish is an initiated elder in the Ifa Orisha tradition of the African diaspora, and she is the author of 6 books, most notably Jambalaya, the Natural Woman's Book of Personal Charms and Practical Rituals, which is a women's spirituality classic and which is on my nightstand right now. She is a member of the Fountain, the Center for Sacred Studies, and the Mother Earth Delegation of United Indigenous Nations. And she serves as a consultant who specializes in racial healing through ancestral storytelling and ritual. And she's lectured and performed at universities and in theaters worldwide. So welcome. It is such an honor and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to throw a question your way right away and ask, so in the series in Changing of the Gods, you spoke of the Orishas who were present and running things during the Uranus-Pluto era, so Oya and Ogun.
Yes.
And I believe that interview was filmed in 2015 at the height of the transit. And so today we still find ourselves in a time of upheaval, but it has different qualities as well. A lot has happened since 2020. And so may I ask, who is present now and how might we honor and adapt to their energies?
Okay, let me say that although Oya and Ogun took the forefront during this transit, you will remember from the taping that I said it is only Oshun who tames Ogun, okay? And so we're always looking at these forces in interaction with each other in different proportions, okay? In different proportions. So we regularly perform divination to ask of these deities, who's running the show, what's happening, and what do you want us to do, okay? The overwhelming message that has been coming through, the latest one, comes in the letter Osameji, which belongs to Oya. It is Oya speaking, and she's speaking on behalf of the earth, right? And the message that we are receiving, she said, no more extractions. No more, stop draining her blood with the oil. Okay, stop shaving her head with cutting down the trees. Stop digging out her internal organs, removing the minerals, okay? Stop it is the basic message before it's too late, okay? And so the way things work in our tradition, each one of us is born as the child of particular forces in nature or particular deities. And I am Oshun, the goddess of the river, is my mother, right? And Shango, the lord of fire, is my father. And Oya is my auntie, okay? So I am always in family with them, but I also have a relationship to the deities of the ocean and of the forest and of different aspects. What's happening right now, and I'll be sending, I think I sent Nina a notice, is the last message that I received is that it is time for us as human beings to get together and beg the water spirits to forgive us for our past behavior, for the pollution, for the withholding, for the damming, for the ways that we have disrespected the water, okay? April 8th through the 13th, I'm gonna be conducting a global ritual where people will be getting together, talking to the spirits of people who died in the waters, like the Middle Passage and all these refugees who have died in the water. We are going to beg the water spirits to forgive us, ask them to continue to support us, praise them for their nature by song and dance and reciting story and creating art and poetry, and then take pledges for what kind of behavioral changes we're going to be responsible for. Okay, so as a child of the river, one of the things that I'm going to do is always go clean trash up out of the river. You know, I'm going to do what I can to stop people from polluting the rivers. But I want people to know that, you know, during this weekend, if you can get to a large body of water in a group, fine. If you can't, turn the faucet on in your kitchen and hold some water in your hand and give, you know, apologize to that and give praise and thanks for that. Now, my astrology tells me that on the 12th, we have a favorable aspect between Jupiter and Neptune coming up that we really need to pay attention to. So I've sent out an audio asking people to participate, and I'm going to send out a document. I'm getting very good response from everywhere, from women in India, from women in Africa, you know, and all over the United States. We need to put our consciousness on the truth that although in terms of the environment, we're really at critical mass, we can, by a change in behavior, turn the tide. We do not have to destroy ourselves. We don't have to.
What a powerful message. Thank you so much. And when you said the dates of when you were conducting this ritual, the little calculations went in my mind, and I thought, oh, that is when the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is happening. And then you brought it up yourself.
That's right.
What exquisite timing.
Oh, pay attention. You know, we pay attention to the reality that, you know, Rick was saying that in intellectual circles, there was a lot of ridiculing of astrology, right? But that's coming out of a culture that ridiculed people who knew that the earth is alive, you know? And so when we perform a divination, we are very clear that we're receiving a multidimensional message. We're receiving a message from the cosmos, from the earth, from the ancestors, from our own consciousness. All of that, none of that is separate, okay? And so oftentimes we will get a reading that says something like, one of the memorable ones from the 90s was that people who were not aware of their behavior could cause a crack in the calabash of the world, okay? It comes in folkloric language, but that year there was a tsunami because there was a 3-inch crack in the plates in the ocean, right? And so what we did then was sound the trumpet and said to all the children of Yemaya, all you mermaids, all you saltwater babies, right? Get on your jobs and placate your mother. That's the world that I live in, where what the stars are doing and what the deities are, is almost a daily conversation.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to build on that, and actually, yes, Rick, please.
I could maybe just add to that. What I love about what Yeye is saying is this sense of communication that's mutual. That there's a sense of, we're not the only beings in the world who are capable of purposeful, intelligent communications and the capacity for carrying meaning in us and so forth. And in a sense, the archetypal astrological perspective that we were exploring in both Cosmos and Psyche and in Changing of the Gods is one in which that also is a kind of dialogue with the cosmos, a dialogue with the soul of the cosmos, what we call the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And so, and the beauty of the astrological perspective of being able to track the movements of the planets, which is basically a kind of tracking of, we can think of them as Jungian archetypes, and we can also think of them as gods and goddesses, as very powerful beings, essences, forces that manifest inside us and outside of it. And I really think the universe has given us this kind of gift of that constant orchestration between the movements of the cosmos, of the larger heavens, and the movements of our own, the patterns of our own human experience here on this earth. And because of that kind of orchestration that's so beautiful to witness, as well as exciting to follow, we're able to have, as Kenny was saying, a greater consciousness, greater awareness, greater agency, we kind of know which gods we're approaching, and have a little bit better idea how to honor those energies and to live in a more life-enhancing way.
That actually opens out into one of the questions we received from the audience, which is, can religion and astrology coexist? And I want to put that question to each of you, because I think where this conversation is going already speaks towards that that answer. But I would love to hear each of your thoughts on, can religion and astrology coexist? And maybe directed toward Kenny as well with that. Another question was, how did you choose the name Changing of the Gods for the series? I know it's spoken about in the opening episode, but choosing that particular name. So Changing of the Gods, can religion and astrology coexist?
Can I start off by saying that I ain't talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality, okay? Because to me, religion is just a set of rules that hold you to a particular idea. But spirituality is recognizing that there is spirit in everything and interacting with it in ritual. Spirit, ritual, that's the word spiritual together, when you put them together. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Ritual is the way that we talk to the gods, that we talk to the spirits, and they are completely compatible.
Yeah, it's funny, Becca, I'm so glad you brought this up, or our viewer brought this up, because Rick and I called him up a few weeks ago to discuss this exact thing, because the changing of the gods, and Rick, can fill in the footnotes on all of this, to say the least. But it's an adaptation of a phrase from Carl Jung, a metamorphosis of the gods. And so I changed it to Changing of the Gods. And the idea is basically what Rick was just describing in the way of the archetypes, however you may see those, in whatever tradition or lens you're looking at that through. But in terms of the correlation with, I appreciate the distinction Yeye is making in terms of spirituality and religion. And at the same time, organized religions do exist, and I respect that very much. The title has nothing to do with God or religion, or in any way reflecting negatively on religion whatsoever, and that never comes up in the film in any light at all. But I think that what it's really about is understanding that. I mean, even if you look at whether you call, episode 10 really goes into the kind of the great mystery, and they don't call it the great mystery for nothing. Mm-hmm. What is consciousness? What are we part of? The point of infinity is you can't wrap your mind around it, right? That's the whole point. And right. We're part of this vast system of intelligence that is so far greater than we are that we can't possibly hold all of that. So I think humility is our constant companion in that regard. And when you think whether you want to call this God or spirit or creator or the great mystery, we're talking about the same thing. And if you believe in a divine intelligence, astrology would seem to be a magnificent, as Rick said, a symphony it's truly the music of the spheres in that regard. So to me, it's not only antithetical to religion. If anything, it affirms this incredible intelligence that we have so little clue about.
Couldn't agree more. And I think it's only a very limited perspective that actually sees religion or spirituality as being antagonistic to astrology or vice versa. Astrology was basically part of the spiritual, religious, cosmological reality of humanity for most of humanity's existence and in most cultures and societies of the world, other than the secular modern Western. And so in a way, modernity is the outlier on this. And there has been an impulse that some religious spokespersons have carried of wanting to oppose astrology if it seemed to be taking away from either human responsibility, our own responsibility for how we act in the world, because somehow the planets are making us be this way. That's why I'm an evil person. I was born under an evil sign or planet, that kind of nonsense. But not there have been astrologers and astrological periods in history when astrology was used in that kind of fatalistic, deterministic way. And I think it's an inadequate understanding of astrology that lends itself to that perspective. The other thing is the opposition between, sometimes with some people, between religion and astrology can derive from a feeling of needing to protect the freedom of God or the freedom of the divine or the omnipotence of the divine, so that there aren't these other sort of sub-divine forces that really have the control. And that too, I think, is a misunderstanding. I mean, the great archetypal powers, they are in some sense manifestations of the underlying divinity of all things, and the display of, I mean, and good astrologers know that whatever you study, whether it is the history of cultures or of a person's individual birth chart or of a particular work of art, all those things are illuminated in quite extraordinary ways when you shine the light of astrology on it. It's like this amazing perspective that's just so fruitful. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's actually astrology is a kind of gift of the divine cosmos to us, and is a gift of God, of Goddess, however we want to personify this great deep mystery.
Right.
So that's how, I think it's a non-problem that has been made into a problem. Misunderstandings of one side or the other.
And Becca, the one other thing to say about that is that, as it says, as Rick reports in the film, the changing of the gods is a changing of the basic principles and symbols and values of a culture or a civilization. And I think that's very much what we present in the film. This is a paradigm shift. It's a shift in values. Rick brings up facing our mortality as a species. Near-death experiences have real power. You have to really go deep on what are those values, symbols, principles of your civilization. So I think that's where the title is coming from.
Yeah, it was actually, in terms of the footnotes, as you were saying, Kenny, it was towards the end of Jung's life when he wrote a powerful essay called The Undiscovered Self. And in that essay, he said, we are at a time where there is great dying and destruction that is at work on many levels: political, ecological, psychological, spiritual. And that also means it's a time of potential rebirth. He said, we are at one of these great moments in history where there is a change, as he said, a metamorphosis of the gods, a changing of the fundamental principles and symbols by which our civilization lives. And God knows that's just what we need to go through right now in order to open up a brighter future for the entire Earth community.
It's really beautiful to see how you're each answering many of the questions that have been coming in, questions about, what is the most powerful or beneficial thing about astrology, and understanding the phases of planetary alignments. And I feel like you've all already been speaking to that, and taking this into our current moment. Another one of the questions that arrived has to do with, the question is, if history rhymes or repeats and matches up with the same recurring planetary activity, would we be able to predict and warn people about the challenging things that are happening now? And paired with that, there was another question about, were astrologers able to foresee the pandemic? So Rick, I don't know if you want to take that on first in terms of the specific, or we can kind of open it out to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, there was in Cosmos and Psyche, I actually did lay out the pattern that in showing how, for example, the great the Black Death, the plague that swept through Europe in the mid 14th century, what alignments were going on there, which in fact are the same ones. It was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, just what we have been going through in that 2020, 2021 period when the pandemic just really swept across the world. In fact, there was some there's a funny meme that went around the internet about how Cosmos and Psyche had predicted that. It showed the gods and goddesses on the cover pointing to the earth and saying, "We warned you, bro. I fucking warned you." Yeah. Anyway, not that I wasn't in the position of warning myself. It was just a matter of, here are the patterns. Here are the kinds of energies and events and trends and perils, as well as potential positive things that we can look for under specific alignments. And in terms of what about now and in the future, can astrologers say things that could be helpful? Yes, indeed. And they are doing that. And I think, some of the listeners may have heard, I did a talk about the 2022 coming alignments that are happening, and and something about the rest of the decade. I said both then and in the one I did for CIIS in 2021 as well. Both of those are on YouTube, and there are definitely useful things that we can hear from insightful astrologers that could help us be more conscious, more prepared, more humble, but also taking stock of how we can best approach the energies that are at work. I don't think we have time to go into specifics about that right here, but it's out there.
Yeah, Beck, if I could just add to that as well, that was one of the other really compelling reasons I wanted to make the film, was that astrology historically has been almost entirely person-centered. It's about you, it's about your subjective life experience. And obviously we all are born in a certain moment in space and time and have a birth chart and, have our own imprint in that way. But what really interested me about Rick's work, and I'd asked an astrologer friend if there were any really good books written about not personal astrology, but societal astrology. Mm-hmm. What are we all going to gather? And, the critical shift in the world today on one level is that we change our pronoun from me to we. I mean, it's that simple. If that doesn't happen, good luck. And so this fascinated me because we're all experiencing these events in the we all of us are capable. We can almost have like a bulletin board and track all the different aspects of a transit in real time while it's actually happening, looking at those kind of manifestations. But I just felt like, you know, that's part of what's so interesting in holding it. We literally held a mirror up to the zeitgeist during much of the transit. And we had an archetypal kind of roadmap based on Rick's work. And then sure enough, it played out, you know, but we're in the we, and I think that we all individually are of course affected in different ways at a given time in this. It's not one giant blender. So we all have our individual part to play and piece in it. But anyway, you know, I just want to, I think the we part of it is very important. We're experiencing this collectively.
So important. Yeah, that's so great. The I to a we, that's quite a pronoun shift, or it represents a spiritual death and rebirth in a sense of our overly armored individualist egoic identity, and to open up to our larger identity as an earth community, first a human community and then an earth community that's so much bigger than just my personal satisfaction.
Well, and Rick, the Scientific Revolutions episode which is a very pioneersy episode, as people familiar with pioneers know, but going into our kinship, our literal kinship with bacteria, you know, and right down the line, and this vast intelligence that we're part of, and you know, the Earth community in that way. So, you know, it's interdependence at the highest level, you know, that's not only human in that way. So I think, by the way, I do want to encourage people, if you're not familiar with pioneers and we're interested in the film, most of the speakers in the film are from our networks, and there's tons of information and media. Tish, of course, has been a valued member of the community for 30 years, probably something like that. And also we shot interviews, you know, with all the interview subjects, obviously, most of them in 2015 and a few in 2016. But those extended interviews are just golden. If you liked what you saw in the film, it's a fraction of what we actually got on camera. And I mean, I've watched them multiple times, and I just learned so much. And the Tish interview, it's always tragic as a filmmaker what ends up on the cutting room floor. It's just heartbreaking. So I definitely encourage you to, you know, I forget which packages it is, but get the ones that have the raw interviews too.
Wonderful.
Now, if I understood your question correctly, you were trying to find out, you know, about the predictive power. You know, were we forewarned about things like the pandemic and the impending war? Let me say that yes, our oracles speak of things like this and tell us what to do to mitigate the energy or how to prepare for it, okay? What is disheartening for me is that sometimes the prediction comes in so far ahead of the actual event that people don't want to pay attention to it. So, you know, I think it was in the mid 80s when we received a divination that said, start saving your seeds. Then Monsanto turns everything into frankenfood, right? Stop eating beef. Then here comes mad cow disease, okay? Now, the two things that are very, very relevant here is we have been being told, return to your herbal supplements. Build up your immunity, take good care of your body, okay? Rather than saying, a pandemic is coming that's gonna kill all of y'all, what the oracle says is it is time for us to up our self-care, okay? And instead of saying, these crazy boys are gonna start World War III and blow everybody up, the oracle says, the ways of the mothers must prevail. Follow the wisdom of the mothers. So the prevention for the problem is always put in front so that we have the option to begin to heal the problem before it is pandemic. What has been hurtful to me is having that information and trying to share it with other people and them paying little or no attention to it, and then watching them suffer needlessly.
I
Well,
think go ahead, Becca.
Oh, I was just going to say what you're describing is very much what one tries to do in a good astrology session too. Basically, I see these transits coming up for you. Here are all the ways that you can participate in it. These are the areas that might be difficult, but here's how you can prepare. Here's how you can kind of fortify yourself. And yeah, those are extraordinary examples too from across the decades that you gave. So thank you. Sorry, Rick, what were you saying?
Oh, actually very similar to what you're saying. And that is that I think what Tish is pointing to is something that astrology at its best can support, which is it doesn't tell us this definite concrete thing is going to happen on that date. Get used to it. It's not like that. It's archetypally predictive. It's not concretely predictive. And because the archetypes have a range of possible ways in which they can be expressed, the gods need to be honored. They can come through in a multiplicity of ways, but there are more destructive ways or there are more creative ways. There are more noble ways or there's less noble ways in which one can manifest the same archetypal energies. And so the beauty of astrology, I think when it's used most skillfully, is precisely that it helps us be better human beings rather than fatalistically resigned human. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually what informs this whole film project, the documentary series that Kenny conceived, because, you know, I wrote Cosmos and Psyche before this whole transit began back in, you know, it was published in 2006, but I'd finished it even before that. And so the transit that it is particularly focused on that began after the publication and went, I mean, really, we're still in the after waves of that powerful Uranus square Pluto transit. Now that Saturn has come onto Pluto and then squaring Uranus, we're still very much in that complex, that force field. And we didn't know, I didn't know in advance, here are the definite ways it's going to come through. But I looked at the history and thought, well, every time Uranus and Pluto have come into one of these alignments, we've seen major social and political movements, emancipatory movements, reform movements, women's liberation, feminist civil rights and the abolitionist movements. Also technological revolutions tend to happen, scientific breakthroughs tend to happen, but also a lot of turmoil, possibility of activating a kind of collective mob mentality because the energies are so overwhelming, that kind of authoritarian populism that can happen. So all I did was I laid out, well, here's what happened in the past. I don't know what's going to happen during the 20-teens, you know, going into 2020, et cetera, but that's the pattern. And we can work with that if we know what the potentials are. And so that's all I wanted to say is just astrology, what Tish is pointing to is very much a one that I see astrology itself as ideally being supporting. And the way the film was made is that it basically started tracking it right in the middle of the transit, and it kind of unfolded before the filmmaker's eyes. Like, so that's what you see when you're looking at these 10 episodes is the unfolding of something that filmmakers didn't know in advance exactly how it was going to unfold.
Well, interesting. The interviews. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tish.
I was just going to say what has been wonderful for me in the run of the film so far is I have had people to call me up and say, now I understand what you've been trying to tell me. Oh, I see. And so I'm great. I'm grateful for that because, you know, I have been trying to tell people, you know, all of this is lined up and we have, you know, the universe is receptive and responsive and we have a role to play in it and it all makes sense in the larger order of things. And so it's been very eye-opening for a lot of people that I know. It's been really, yeah, okay, that's what you mean, huh? Yeah, that's what I mean.
These 10 episodes have made accessible in such beautifully condensed form something that usually takes years and
a
lifetime to be able to communicate, and it really opens a doorway. So Kenny, we have your vision and bravery to thank for bringing it into that particular form.
Well, I also wanted to say one of the things I just adore about filmmaking is it's a highly collaborative medium. And you know, the auteur theory is mostly nonsense. It's not one, you know, authoritarian director. And I've had this project just had a sense of destiny to it from the minute it arose as an idea, and the right people collected around it for the right reasons. I think we all felt like this is part of our life path, and you know, we're meant to do this. You know, Rick obviously, and then through Becca, actually, I met Max Diarman, who's my other producer, who is just a gem, and our lead editor, Theo Badashi, both of whom are students of Rick's and are intimately familiar with the work, quite apart from being brilliant filmmakers and artists. And my wife, Nina Simons, has been a creative consultant every step of the way and has a background in film and theater, and Laurie Benenson, all this well I need to mention. And there are many, many fingerprints on this, and so many people, you know, when I see it myself and watch it, I can tell you exactly where that idea came from or whose this was, or and then at a certain point it actually becomes a Vulcan mind meld where it just, you know, it's much bigger than any one of us. You know, magic happens when that happens. And so anyway, I love, you know, in that way making the film. There was so much brilliance from so many wonderful people and different perspectives.
I'd love to present one more question to all of you as we come toward our conclusion at the end of the hour. This also comes from someone in the audience, and they asked, what can we best do over the next few years to get through this challenging time of chaos and serve the divine at a time where so many people feel lost and disempowered?
Renew your relationship to nature. You know, I think that is my real answer. Slow down a little bit, be quiet, listen to the birds, you know, plant some things, honor the water, enjoy the sun, and let that beauty translate into love of self and other. That's the formula that I see. And, you know, in different ways, it's the same message that we keep getting. The problem we have is because we've divorced ourselves from nature and spirit. The answer is in re-entering a right relationship with that.
That's beautiful, Tish. I really think that you're getting right to the heart of it. Just more people having a direct sense of their intimate relationship to, and to be nourished by it and to feel the spiritual reality. I was trying to describe what it's like to see a tree or a squirrel, a bird as my kindred spirit, like the same energies and qualities that are in them are in me, and even, you know, reaching out to the sun as the tree does, or my four limbs as the squirrel has, or even the bird, as we all come out of the same tetrapod lineage of vertebrates. Well, I think the word that came, or the phrase that came to me, is there's a kind of biospiritual glow that you can see
Yes.
in the tree, in the bird, in the squirrel. That's so it's luminous, and it's both very natural, biological, and it's also very spiritual and numinous. There's a sacred quality to it, and seeing that, you're never the same, and you always will feel at home on this earth in a way that we those who have been hyper urbanized and alienated from the natural world move out of touch with that. Maybe I think the thing that came to my mind, Becca, when you asked that question, Ye's answer is, of course, spot on. And I think also in terms of slowing down, as she said, just like breathing, paying attention to your breathing, slower breathing, deeper breathing, that just in the immediate moment, that's such an important thing. But then on a larger scale, like how do we live our lives when there is such a global crisis happening that's much bigger than any one of us can, put our finger on a button and make this change, or it's so much bigger. We're participating in, but also at the mercy of such much larger forces than any one of us can claim control of. So what do we do in those circumstances? How do we live our lives? And I think of, if we remember that that the universe, we are vessels of the universe. We are the universe, each of us as an individual. And the universe loves flowering in an individual way in each of us. So our task in some ways is to just find out who, what in me feels the most kind of creative joy and a sense of I am being who I really am in a way that I can see I have a certain reasonable competence at something, and then that whatever that is, if that's useful to others, if it's useful to others, if I have some kind of seeming special competence at something, and that it gives me a kind of creative joy to do, then be loyal to that, cultivate it, discipline it, and become a vessel of that, and that will be your contribution to the big, because we all have to contribute in individual ways to a larger group collective effort.
That's called your ashe. In my tradition, what you just described was your personal ashe, right? And the luminescence in the tree is the ashe of nature. It really is defined as the power to affect change, because it's constantly moving through us, being used by us and passed on from us. It's really beautiful the way you have articulated it just now, Rick.
Thank you.
We need to be talking in the many languages that our people can understand.
Thank you. That's an honor.
Well, I would definitely second what each of you is saying, to the 10th power, and I'll raise you one also, which is that, when we started Bioneers in 1990, the premise was that the solutions residing in nature surpass our conception of what's even possible. The power of nature is beyond our comprehension, but has a profound power to regenerate, and it will regenerate. As Oren talks about in the film, we're sands on a beach. There's going to be there for another billion years, at least. And so the solutions residing in nature surpass our conception of what's even possible, and that's very much what the work of Bioneers has long been about. And at the same time, we're in this clash of paradigms now, and this is about democracy. It's about empire versus earth democracy. That is, as Joanna Macy so beautifully puts it. And my great hope with the film was not only that people will become, inspired and learn some stuff and get educated in certain areas, but to engage and to act. We've all, in this time, we're all called upon to be leaders. That's it. In whatever way is appropriate to us. Each of us has something to bring. And, when people ask me, okay, I get it, it's serious, what do I do? I could, I have enough trouble figuring out my own life. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Follow your heart, Find out what your passions are. What do you want to learn about? What do you most care about? Who do you want to be with? Find your friends and bring them along. But this is a moment for action. And, again, Bioneers, there's huge resources on our website about a whole kaleidoscope of work that the kind of, what you saw in the film, what Tom and Mari do with deconstructing corporate power, Powell's work on othering and belonging. By the way, John will be at the Bioneers conference in May. Hopefully Tish will be there, Rick will be there. So if you want to, if you're going to San Francisco, the rest.
There's a song with that name.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Catchy.
Going to San Francisco. Okay.
Well, thank you all so much for your words of wisdom and inspiration. It really is such an honor and a privilege to sit here with all of you and to be able to just absorb the extraordinary knowledge that you've each cultivated over the course of your lifetimes. So thank you for bringing it here.
I really want to also thank all of our viewers and people who have watched the film. And I've heard from so many people who've been telling their friends and watched it more than once. And for those of you who are buying it, please support independent film. It's really important. But we're just so grateful that you're out there and appreciating it. And we have, we're figuring out next steps and, stay in touch. And this is not the last of it.
I share.
Well, we wish you all a beautiful evening. Thank you to each one of you for your presence here and to everyone listening for your presence as well. And in light of what Tish said about connecting with nature, this film, this work is about looking to the stars. And as we end our evening, I would even say, go actually look to the stars tonight and see them twinkling above you and what you feel in your being in response. That's really what this is about, I think, is a reconnection.
Thank you.
Very beautiful. And
Thank
thanks
you
for the
very
great,
much.
yeah, thank you for hosting us and moderating our conversation back up. You did wonderful.
All right, everybody, behave yourselves.